A very wise superintendent told me one time. He said, if you're always making it happen and not having a good balance, right? How am I ever going to need you need any help?
Hi, it's me, your teacher turned CTIO friend, Diane Dersch, and this is Beneath the Water. You know, Donna, I remember when I first met you. I think it was at a Tech and Learning summit or event or something. And, you know, me coming from Midwest Wisconsin, I had not ever heard a lot of Southern accents, you know?
I have a double dose.
Oh, yes. And you got, Miss Sweet Donna, and then, we've got Miss Sweet Sheryl. Marlo was there, all with these accents. And I recall that wherever Donna was, you seemed to be in the center of all the crowds of people, or there would be laughter.
I like people.
There would be
That's
laughter.
what it's all about.
Yes, yes. And I'm like, who is this lady? Who is this lady? And so I got really curious, and I watched you from afar, probably for a few conferences or things I happened to be at, because I'm like, I want to get to know her more. She seems like a fun person. I want to be in her circle.
Well, I did ask somebody one time, I said, can you tell me what it is I really do? Because my mother always asked me that question, and I do have a very Southern accent because I was raised in Georgia and then moved to Alabama, so you can't get much more Southern.
That is a double dose.
But I am the only person in my family that talks Southern. I think I do it just because I haven't tried to get rid of it, just because I had an experience one time, and I was in a pageant, and the director looked at me and said, my gosh, girl, where are you from? And he said, and all I had said was, hello, my name is Donna Williamson. And I thought, I'll just keep my Southern accent, thank you very much, and I will wear it proudly. Well, so I never tried to get rid of it.
There you go. And that's like really me with my Midwestern accent, which I don't think I have at all.
I don't think you do.
Right?
No.
When I say I'm from Wisconsin, people kind of look at me funny. So, yes, I get it that, we are the people we are, and that's what makes you who you are.
I was watching you, too, because I always enjoy, been around for a long time, started in this very young, at about 24 when technology first started. Very fortunate to get in that position. But I always noticed that you were very warm. And I always like people that are kind. I don't like people that are not kind. I don't really care if you're mean to me, but I can't stand for you not to be kind to other people. So, but that's what I noticed about you. And now I've learned that you're a tremendous storyteller.
Oh.
We always kind of talk about you're the storyteller in our group.
Oh, yeah. I do tell the stories. I seem to have plenty of experiences.
That's why
right?
You make a good thought partner for the CoSN Academy, yes.
Oh, yes. Well, and maybe that's what brought us together, is kind of that inclusivity. You are always inviting people in. And I think, that's something from my life. I may not have always been the person in the in crowd. I was kind of on the fringes. And, probably both of us invite people in to our circle.
Well, I think sometimes we're not aware. And I was made aware probably at an early age about those types of things. Was fortunate enough to be in some extracurricular activities that were kind of out in the front, and did it just because my friends were doing it and wanted to do it. And, the first thing you hear from somebody is like, well, you're always running around together. You're just staying together, and people can feel left out. And I was just like, no, I would never want to do that.
You're hanging out with your friends.
And so it became very important to me that when you see someone at a conference, even today, as an adult, to say, hey, do you know so-and-so, Diane? Do you know Susan?
Yes.
Susan,
yes.
do you know Diane? And to try to make those connections. And so finally, when I asked somebody, what is it that I really do? What's my real job? And somebody told me, they said, you're a people connector.
Oh,
and I thought, well, good. My mother asked me all the time, Donna, what exactly is it that you do? So now I can tell her, Mom, I'm a people connector.
Yes, well, and you do. You find the special parts of people and you match them up. So, and you tend to know a bunch of people.
That's because I tend to talk a lot.
Well, yeah, maybe that's the secret. Well, you and I and Sheryl and Frankie wrote a book together, the Savvy EdTech Leader, and we kind of switched off on the chapters we wrote and the sections we wrote. And so I asked you to find one of your favorite sections and Could you read it for us?
I will. And I chose this one because it's the hardest one for me. And I have to say that before I read it, starting in ed tech when I was pretty much the only woman. There was no professional development. So every time I went to professional development, I went with people in manufacturing and business. And so I'd be the only female there. And so I felt like, and I was very young.
That's
So
a
at
lot of
24
things.
to be over all the technology for a district. And so I think I tried to work harder. I had a little bit of imposter, syndrome, like,
Sure.
oh, why am I here? And, why does my voice matter? And so I think I tried to work harder. But at the same time, I'm a very, very committed wife and mother. Been married to my high school sweetheart. So we've been together for 47 years. So, I would just work a lot, worked hard, worked a lot, and it was all changing, and networks were coming in, and then computers, and then, I've been in it since, wireless. And so it was constantly changing, and always wanting to prove that I deserved a seat at the table. So I decided to write about work-life balance. And when I was talking to my adult daughters, who are very successful women in their own right now, one of them looked at me and said, Mom, do you really think that you're the best person to write about that? And I said, well, I've learned a lot over the years. And of course, then I looked at her and, I was like, well, did you miss out on anything, as you're, having a working mom? And they're like, no, Mom, you showed us that you can have it all. And that's probably the best compliment I've ever received.
That
For
is
your adult
something.
daughters to
Yes,
tell you
for your
that.
children. And now they have children as well?
One's an attorney, one's a vet, one's got 3 children, one's got 2, and one on the way next month. So, and they fully plan to continue working in their professions, and they are very involved in their children's lives. And so I said, well, I figured it out along the way. So hopefully by the time you got to be teenagers, I had kind of figured it out. Everything from we would do our homework together. They would be doing their homework. I'd be in the same room, and I'd be doing my homework.
Right.
So we kind of worked it out that way. And oftentimes they were, with me at work in the summers. I'd say, come on.
Take your daughter to work, huh?
Yes, take your daughter to work. I need you to go plug in a mouse to all these computers.
See, they probably got a technical education
It
as well.
worked really well until one of the teachers one time thought that my oldest daughter actually worked for the school district because she was setting up PCs, and sometimes people get a little anxious about the technology in their classroom, and she made a comment to her, it's like, I really wish you people would get this done, so I need to work in my room. And, she was a volunteer.
Yeah, exactly.
So she learned a lot of lessons very young. So anyway, I decided to write about that. And I'm just going to read the first paragraph. And I think so many people in any leadership role can relate to this. But, as leaders, we must acknowledge that technology, especially smartphones, they've made us accessible to people in our work and personal lives 24/7. The line between work and personal time has definitely blurred. Successful, and I'm going to say ed tech leaders because that's what we were writing about, but it's any leaders, strive to achieve a healthy work-life balance. Some refer to this balance as managing boundaries, and others use the phrase work-life integration. Regardless of what we call it, the ability to avoid being consumed by the vast responsibilities of today's ed tech leader is a common goal for most, and it can be challenging to accomplish. And I did find it challenging to accomplish early on. I think that as I learned from up-and-coming leaders like yourself.
Wow.
And people that, I remember you telling me about your cadence of meetings one time.
Oh, yes.
And it was like, okay, that's good. It's very set. And she's covering these items, at specific times and trying to really, you try to knock out the background noise, right?
Yep.
And then
scheduling those ahead of time.
I watched a new curriculum instruction director, and she was hired, and she said, I don't answer email on the weekends. And I thought I was going to pass out. I was like, is that an option? And she said, if it's an emergency or something I need to know, you need to call me because I'm not checking my phone when I'm with my family on the weekends. And I'm just like, I didn't know that you could even not check your email when you're on vacation.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
and I
And
thought, okay,
I've heard leaders, do that because the other thing is when you email them over the weekend, you don't want them to feel compelled to email you back because,
yes.
okay, you got off your plate. You don't need to do that. Okay, I'll do it over the weekend. But then that other person might feel, hey, my boss is giving me this message. I better answer them. So I know that some people have used like the scheduler
Yep.
in their email and then, set it for Monday morning, blah, blah, blah,
And
at a
that's so
certain
true.
time.
And, you think about it, and I am one that, you know, I'm just as likely to wake up at 3 in the morning and go, that's what I need to do. I
Mhm.
can rewire that network and we'll never have to go down. Because I mean, having done this so long, I've done every technical aspect of the job as well as having a, instructional background. So some of the strategies that I thought through, and I actually, most sections of the book, I kind of wrote from my own experiences. But this
Sure.
was a section that I actually reached out to people that were in other professions, other working women. And I think I did ask one guy, but most of them were working women. And I asked them, and they were younger than me.
Sure.
And I said, what do you do? How do you feel about this? How do you establish? And because they were all very, very successful women, and they all had children and very busy family lives, um, and and so I said, what do you do? And I got some really great feedback, and one of them was pointing out that like you said, when you send an email because you have a great idea, those around you, especially those that work for you, are like, am I supposed to answer this now?
Right.
And so I started either scheduling it or saying, let's talk about X on Monday. I'm going to send you a calendar invite. I want to talk about this, or I need to get this done because I realized, and I was guilty of that, Diane. I
Yeah.
was guilty of
I
sending
think we
things
all
and
were.
not having those disclosures. And so I became I think it was an awareness of that work life
Right.
balance.
Right.
And so it was to set personal and professional goals. And I even had a conversation about that. We've been at a conference and somebody was talking to me about their work life balance. And the first thing I said was, what are your personal goals? What are your personal goals? When you
Right.
were at Green Bay, what were your personal goals?
Well, first of all was to get past the noise, right? And get the things done that you need to get done. And so I think a lot of the things that I did were like you talked about setting up things, getting things on calendars and creating systems,
Yes.
within all the mentoring I do, right? I talk about setting up systems that I've always said, and I said this with Frankie too, you can take good people and put them in a bad system and they will not succeed. But if you could take mediocre people, put them in a good system and they will succeed.
Well, and I learned the hard way again. I learned so much over a 45-year span. But when I first became an ed tech leader, I was in a very impoverished school district, and I was a one-man person. So I was actually teaching 8 technology classes a day where there were no curriculum. So I had to
Mhm.
write all the curriculums, and I maintained all of the equipment, did all the purchasing for the district, and so I utilized students, right? But I didn't have a really good work-life balance because my daughter was very young, and my husband
A
is
lot
a
of
true
stuff.
co-parent, and I would take her with me, but I would work late at night, and it was very blurred. But the really bad part about that was because I had not balanced, I had not set some boundaries. They had been picked as one of the number 1 schools in the country for technology.
Wow.
But then I left, and it all died.
Yes.
Who suffered? The kids,
Right.
the
When it
the district.
becomes part of a person, right?
It
Versus
was a person and not a system,
right, right.
and I did whatever it took to make it happen and never set any boundaries. A very wise superintendent told me one time, he said, "If you're always making it happen and not having a good balance, right? How am I ever going to know you need any help?"
Yes, that is true.
And I said, "But you called me and said this was a problem. And it's 5:30 in the afternoon, so I'm not going home because you have a problem." He's like, "If you continue to jump and not say, hey, It's 5:30. I need to go home. Can I do that tomorrow morning? How am I ever going to know that you need help?
So
And that
did
really
you
resonated with
you
me.
develop those boundaries then? Is that
Yes.
like it sounds like great coaching from your leader to say that.
Yes.
And so I think that's something we could all ask
Because I was so
ourselves.
young,
Right,
you know.
right. And you don't know any better. And of course, you just want to do
Right.
a good job,
You know,
like you said.
I didn't set a boundary of I need to go home.
Yes.
Can I do this tomorrow? I mean, I did it respectfully. So yes, I started setting more boundaries. But the other thing I think was, as a working woman, I felt not bad. Well, yeah, I felt bad. I don't know if you felt bad, but I was constantly asking friends, can you take my daughter to Girl Scouts? Can you do this? And these are friends. They're not going to let me pay them to do that,
Right.
right? But when I talked to these working women about this and how they were handling it, they were like going, it doesn't have to be money. Have you ever thought about, this is what I do. When I have someone pick up my daughter from school every day and drop her off by the house, she's old enough to stay by herself. And about every so often, I'll take her something, for dinner. I'll bring them dinner.
Sure.
And I had the guy that I talked to, he actually told me, he said, I'm a single dad. And I feel so bad because I'm always asking people, can you pick up so and so from dance or drop off from basketball or whatever? And he said, one day I just showed up and I mowed their lawn.
Oh, that's
So I
awesome.
think that
Those
sometimes,
are
when you're hesitant to form a work-life balance because we're like, how can I repay this
right.
village of people
Right.
that are helping me?
But that's a great acknowledgement, Donna, that, yeah, I mean, we all need to work together. We
Yes.
know that we can't do it alone. And so just having that within yourself to ask for help. And I love how, you said that, okay, well, maybe I couldn't, I didn't have to pay money, couldn't return the favor by picking up their kid.
Yeah.
But mowing the lawn, I mean, that's awesome. So I'm so happy that people are finding creative ways to
Yes.
solve these problems moving forward.
And I think we do. I think we do people a disservice, and that's another thing that I think that as I progressed and we built a team and that type of thing, would be to acknowledge things. And I even
Yes.
used to tell my team, I was like, look, by the time I was near the end of my tenure as a CTO, it was like, look, I choose to check my email on Sunday nights. I do that because it helps me. I
Right.
do it because it relieves me from stress so that I can start Monday morning fresh. I don't expect you to do that.
Yeah, I like that you set that expectation up because everyone has their own work cadence,
Right.
right?
Just because you see me do it. And,
Yes.
to show people that you will take time off to refresh. And that was one of the key strategies that we talked about in this chapter. And there was a lot of other specific examples because, like I said,
Yes.
this was one chapter that I thought, I want to hear from other people. This is
Yeah,
not
that was
just my
good.
experiences.
A little bit of research in there.
Just
Yes.
real live people interviews,
Lady on the street.
Yes,
There
lady
you
on the
go.
street. But I think we do our teams a disservice if we model for them a workload that's not sustainable. And I know that this pertains to all fields. And I'll use my daughter as an example. She had someone walk into her one day in her office, and she manages a lot of associates and thinks she's a law partner, and she's over the entire group. And one of her associates came in and said, "I don't ever want to be you." She's like,
Oh,
"You're a phenomenal attorney, but
right.
it feels like you work all the time." And
Yes.
it was a wake up call for her. And she said, "I think I have conveyed that to you, but what you don't see is I'm in and out of the office so much. You don't understand that I leave and go to the school play. I don't ever talk about it because it's personal." And I think sometimes we have to not be afraid to let people know that, oh, yes, I do work all the time. I mean, not all the time, but I certainly work hard. Uh, but I do take time for myself. And I think sometimes
Yes.
we're almost embarrassed to say that because we think we're going to be judged. But what we're doing is we're painting an unrealistic expectation. And of course, they've continued to develop a relationship. And now this person gets it. And so she felt very comfortable coming to her later and saying, I've just had a new child and I'd like to work reduced hours. I understand I'm going to make less money, but I'd like to work reduced hours for the next 3 years. And and companies and law firms are recognizing this, and they're doing it.
Wow.
So I think that, you have to do what works for you, but you have to be honest about it, and then you have to accept if it doesn't fit in the work environment. Like, obviously, a teacher can't come in and say, oh, I'd like to only teach 3 days a week. Well, then perhaps you
That's
need
not
to
gonna
take it.
work.
You might need to do a different profession.
Right,
But I
right.
do think that we have to model for our teams that we work with realistic
I
expectations,
really
and that
like that.
we also take time
Yes,
to
and show
rest
that.
and reflect.
And like for me on the weekends, and hopefully now, that I'm in my rewirement, you'll see more of it. But, I love fishing. Everyone knows I love fishing in the summertime because on LinkedIn, there's a picture of me and my fish. And I feel like that's something I want to do to give back to the community as well and to remind people, yeah, you know what? Do something fun. Get out, on the weekends, get out in nature and those things. So
But
what is your way of
but
modeling?
Diane, the thing that I think people also don't understand, because I've had this happen to me, I have a very unique way of working. So in other words, for me, I'm most productive in the mornings, right? Other people, got a real dear friend, Sheryl Abshire. Many people know her. She is a worker at night, but we
Yes,
respect each other's work schedule.
your
So I
office
know not to
hours.
call her before 10, and she knows not to call me before 9. And even at 9, I'll get a text that says, "Are you up?" Because we work collaboratively
Sure.
on the academy. So I think sometimes when people see your work schedule, especially in some of the roles where you do, if the internet goes down and you're a CTO, you're going to have to find somebody to make sure that goes up because
Right,
you're the ultimate person that's
right.
responsible. But but on the other hand, so there's all types of things like that that are emergencies that you have to deal with. That's part of being the leader, right? But I do think that when people used to tell me all the time, they'd go, "You don't need to do this. You need to take time off. You need to rest. You need to." It literally caused me stress. And then again, because they didn't understand that when as my 90-year-old mother says when she's ready to go to bed now, she's like, "I'm clocking out. Clocking out." They didn't see when I clocked out. They
Right,
didn't understand
right.
that I might leave early with the superintendent if I had gotten where I needed to be with what I needed to do, and he understood that. I might leave early on a Friday, but then I wanted to check my email on Sunday afternoon. So I think we have to be very careful not to put more pressure on people about if they do choose to work on the weekend because
Right.
it's on their mind and it really is relieving stress because they choose to do that. So I think everybody has to find their
Their own
boundaries,
approach.
their work-life balance. And then but you cannot, if you're working more or working different or whatever, you can't necessarily impress upon other people that that's what theirs should be because it
Right.
is a very individual thing.
Yeah, circadian rhythms and everything
Yes.
else, right? Sleep patterns and, finding those times.
Yeah.
Well, if you had to give one word of advice or one hint of advice or provide something to our up and coming leaders about boundaries and time management, what would you say to them?
Um, Start in the way that you intend to go because it's a journey. It's not a sprint. So if you come out of the chute and you're just trying to do everything all the time and, you'll burn out, number one. So I think it's, sit down and think about your personal goals, your personal life goals. What is it that you want to do? And I think that when you do that, then you need to look at the job that you've taken. And you really need to think about it before you take the job. find out what the job is, find out what the expectations are, compare them with your personal life choices. Do they line up? I can't tell you how many people I talk to, and I said this to somebody the other day, and it's like, maybe this is not the job for you.
Sometimes there's a mismatch. You're
It's a
right.
mismatch.
And that might be a hard truth.
It's just a hard
actually,
truth. It's
so-
kind of like sometimes you have to leave to come back.
Yes.
But, I would say look at your personal life goals, look at the expectations for the job before you ever take it, see if they line up. And then when you have the job, work with your team, talk about the norms. What are the expectations there?
Right,
And
right.
let them know. Just if I send an email on a Saturday, and I forget to say, don't worry about this, it's probably because I forgot. I might not tell you. But I don't expect you to read your emails if you're on a Saturday. If it's an emergency, and that's the other thing, outline the boundaries for what to do in the event that you're not there.
Right.
So
Have
that people
that
aren't
backup
scrambling.
plan.
Outline the boundaries of how do you handle an emergency? What are the expectations? Because I think if you set those boundaries and those expectations, and I think those go parallel, that you won't burn out as easily, and you won't, feel as stressed. But then don't judge other people for what works for them.
Right. Well, I
What
like
worked for
that.
you, by the way?
Know those finish lines.
Well-
because I think sometimes for me, that's what I need to know. What is the finish line? What does done look like?
Yes.
Because sometimes you're on a project and, what does done look like? Well, maybe the expectation is I get it here, but I take it much farther because I want to do my job well, right?
See, and I'm a type A.
And
I
so
mean,
understanding and being transparent about, okay, what does the done job look like is helpful.
And that's the other thing, like if you're the personality, like, I like to do things, the best they can be. I'm so type A. I'm organized.
Donna gets stuff done.
I like
yes.
organization. That brings me calm.
Yes.
But I just, and I think we just really not to judge other people that choose to work more. Be comfortable with your boundaries.
I like that.
Be comfortable with your boundaries.
And I think those are good words of wisdom to end on. So thank you very much for this lovely conversation.
Always
and,
good.
All the boundaries and all the things, because I think that's what leaders need. Those are important words for leaders to live by and experiment and figure out just,
What
what does
works.
their work look like.
Be
Okay.
creative. That was your word.
There you go.
Be creative about what you do. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for
Donna.
having.
I always appreciate this. Well, here we are with Sheryl Abshire, the Sheryl Abshire. I remember you, Sheryl, when I don't know where I was. Again, it's like I knew of these big names.
Oh,
And I wanted to get close to the big names, and I wanted the big names to know me as well. And so I must have been at something that I paid out of my own pocket to go to a conference where I saw your name and you were speaking. And it was E-rate or something. And so I walked up to you and I introduced myself. Um, or maybe it was a tech and learning thing, because there were times when someone was speaking and there was always Sheryl Abshire standing up, and you would have a bright colored jacket on and you would say something really smart. I recall that you'd grab the microphone if there was one.
well, I'm always looking for a microphone. You know that, Diane.
And then you would say something really smart. And actually, that became one of my tricks. It was a Sheryl Abshire trick of saying something really smart and then sitting down again. You'd always introduce yourself as well. You'd say, "My name is Sheryl Abshire," and what school you're from, and then you would say your smart thing. I recall I was at an MSISAC thing, 100, people in security, most of them men, and very few K-12 people there. But I pulled the Sheryl Abshire and got the mic, stood up, said something smart, and sat right back down again.
And it has served you well, Diane. It has served you well. I think the lesson there is in a room where you possess knowledge and information, never underestimate your own abilities and knowledge. I guess it's just a confidence thing that
I think you're right.
has certainly held us well over the years, certainly as females in a profession that is male dominated. I very much like many other people of my generation that began working in ed tech earlier, in school leadership early, was kind of in a groundbreaking experience as a female. I was one of the first female principals in my district, younger, and walked into a room that was primarily men, and decided the night before to wear a red suit.
Miss Sheryl.
And
Yep.
somebody was like, my husband was like, you don't want to wear that Navy suit? I said, I absolutely don't want to wear the Navy suit because they'll all be in Navy suits. And I was the only school leader in the district that had not moved from a school assistant principalship to a principalship. I moved from a school librarian to the principal of a very large elementary school without that step. And so I skipped that step. And I already knew they were like, well, who does she think she is? We all had to be an assistant principal. And now here, Miss Prissy's going to jump over
With a red suit.
with her red suit over the other people that applied for the job who were assistant principals. And so I knew that I had to exude confidence, and I had to command knowledge and know what I was talking about, not speak, to speak, but speak from a knowledge base that other people would say, oh, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Or, oh, I never thought of that.
In fact, I think that's what I noticed that caught my attention. You would stand up, say something smart, sit back down. And then after the session was done, people would come up to you afterwards and say what you said was really smart. And wouldn't you know, at that MSISAC thing, same thing happened to me, right? I thought, okay, that's a good Sheryl Abshire technique right there.
I think it's a good whole lot of people technique.
Yes.
I think I
yes.
spun it off something I had seen before. But again, being raised as a young woman in the South, I was born and raised in Texas, moved to Louisiana in high school, and began my career, in Louisiana. But, at an early age, coming from divorced parents, and my brother and I spending our entire life growing up with my grandparents and my mother, thank goodness, my grandmother and my mother were very strong women,
They must have
very
been really
early.
good role models.
They were exceptional role models and built great confidence as me as a young girl. So rather than being aggressive, I always continued to use the other A word. Well, I don't see it as aggressive. I see it as assertive. And I think that in this day and age, not everything has changed, and that females who move into leadership roles have to exude confidence. They have to be assertive. They have to stand in their place, in their time with confidence and knowledge, and know when to speak. But Diane, I also think sometimes it's good for us to know when not to speak, when to
Yes.
listen.
Oh, I most definitely know that as well. I'm curious about when you met me or what you remember early on in the early years. Was there something that made you say, oh, there's Diane Dersch?
I remember meeting you at some events because you did come up and speak to me, and you were a young woman.
And I am now, too.
You were still very young. We are all young. This hair
Yes.
color continues to work for us. Only our hairdresser knows for sure. But I remember meeting you and thinking you were up and coming. I remember
Interesting.
when you were deciding to run for the CoSN board. And because I had been on the board and, worked and helped move other people into the board because I knew it was such an incredible organization
Yes, great
for leadership,
opportunity.
ed tech, but key leadership principles that I was telling people about you.
Hmm.
I've always felt like one of my strengths has been a promoter and a builder.
My hype girl?
Yep, a hype girl. And so I can remember telling people, you should vote for her. She's an up and comer.
Wow.
She is going to be someone and something, and she stands in her place and she's knowledgeable. And so I remember that about you. And then when we became colleagues and became close friends and wrote our book together, I thought how lucky I am that our paths crossed, because building relationships and the network to me is the biggest part of leadership. It's not about who I am, it's who I can be with the support, the encouragement, the circle of trust with other colleagues. And I think that was one of the things that led the four of us to writing a book, is that we all were confident, we were extremely knowledgeable, and we each had niches
Yes.
of information that we brought to it. And it was a powerful combination when we came together and shared our savviness.
Yes, and speaking of the Savvy EdTech Leader, you have a section that you are particularly fond of, because I think it speaks to, the alliances that we have all built. And I just want to say again, Sheryl Abshire, you have been one of the key role models in the field for me. So thank you for that. Could you share the paragraph that you've...
Yeah, I decided when we were working on the book, of course, we went through the chapters, we selected things that resonated with us, that we felt like we had something to say about. And one of the things that I felt particularly passionate about was the section I wrote about Run with Winners. And I'll read this little section if you're okay with that. Great leaders know how to get the job done. They know how to motivate and inspire their team. And they spend their time in the company of other great leaders. They watch and learn as other great leaders go about their work, leading, supporting, growing, and evolving as a professional and a person. One of the key components in becoming a great, effective EdTech leader, or really any kind of leader, is knowing what leadership skills are essential to your leadership learning. You must be cognizant of what leadership skills, techniques, and tools you need to sharpen and improve your leadership. By associating with leaders that you admire, you can grow and evolve into the leader that you want to be. Warren Buffett said, "It's better to hang out with people better than you. Pick out associates whose behaviors are better than yours, and you'll drift in that direction." And I think that's so important, is that there's the old saying, guilt by association.
Yes.
I like to say,
osmosis.
I say knowledge and prestige by association, that you are known with who you hang with.
Yes.
I can remember, in school, my grandmother and mother would say, no, those are not good people for you to hang around with. Well, I like them, Mama. I like them, Grandma. No, they don't have a good reputation. And if you associate with those people, that will be your reputation. And that stuck with me my entire life. Always sought out people that I felt like were highly respected, people that were motivated with the same passion that I had. And it's held me well. And it held me with with the four of our Savvy sisters that wrote the book, because I can't think of any three other people that I'm more proud of to be associated with and have my name printed on the copy of an ISTE book than Diane, Donna Williamson and Frankie Jackson.
Well, that is something. And, something that resonated with me on that is that it said you study and you learn from it. And here, when I did this introduction, I didn't even really realize, I was studying and learning from you. And, when I told you that story. And so that is so true. I recall there's a leader I worked with when I was chief in Green Bay. And something went a little sideways in a meeting that I was running and that she was in as well. And after that meeting, she followed me to my office, closed the door.
Sometimes that's not a good thing. That strikes fear.
No, she was curious though.
Okay.
And she closed the door and she said, Diane, you handled this situation in a way that I'm very curious about. Like, why did you do this or this? I had to de-escalate a situation. And so she was so curious about how and what my de-escalation techniques were that she followed me to my office and asked me the question. And again, she was one where I said, I know she is going to go far. Why? Because she is watching and she's learning and she's asking the question. She did a dissection with me. So has that happened with you as well?
I think oftentimes, again, it's that listening piece.
Yes.
And I'm known for speaking my mind pretty freely and clearly. But I think one of the things I learned early in my career, especially when I was a brand new principal with a group of very tough guys, and that listening piece and learning from others and making sure that the path I struck out on had a strong chance of success. Not that we're not all risk takers, and I'm not a risk taker, but I think in a leadership vantage point,
Yes.
that you have to know that you have to come out ahead. Not that you can't fail and learn from failure, but especially when you're moving into a leadership role, failure can be cataclysmic if you haven't considered all of the options and made clear, focused decisions based on your best chance of success. I can remember starting to meet with a group of principals. My district in Calcasieu Parish was very large, about 35,000 students, and different cities within the entire county, or in Louisiana, we call them parishes. And so in the city of Westlake, where I was principal, there were 2 elementary schools, 1 middle school, and a high school. So there was a feeder pattern. And the 4 of us met monthly together. 4 pretty strong guys, and they all had assistant principals. I did not. And so we talk about things, and the word started spreading about things I was doing at the school. I had come from a librarian position where I had the first technology in the school district, experimenting, put in a modem back in the day when nobody was connected with modems. And connected all the librarians together, and people were like, what are you doing? I said, oh, that's for me to know and you not to find out. There were no filters, and we just connected kids all around the world.
The internets, yes.
The internet's just getting started. And so I'm at that meeting with those school leaders, and one of them said to me, I guess he thought he was going to strike fear in me. I was like, he didn't know me very well. And so he said, Sheryl, we're real happy to have you here in our group. And I'm like, oh, thank you, dear sir, kind sir. Let me defer to you. And he said, but girl, you got to slow down. And I said, pardon me? He said, you got to slow down. There's too much going on over there. And, there's a lot of talk in the community. You got to slow down.
Or is it that he needs to speed up?
Absolutely, Diane. That's exactly what I said to him. I said, well, Diane, I would just say to you, I think you guys need to speed up.
Yes.
Because,
they're afraid you're making look them bad, huh?
There was some concern about that. And so I think that the point to that little vignette, that little story, is that don't be afraid to do the right thing. I tell people all the time, it's always the right time to do the right thing. And that school was in decline. That
Sure.
school had huge problems, but fantastic teachers that had never been given options, that had never had professional development, didn't have a principal that believed in them. And I came in basically from a teacher perspective of, let's go.
So you kind of had to be a hype girl right there. I mean, how do you manage change in a situation like that where they're used to not getting anything? And then here comes this principal with all these ideas.
Well, I think the key was building trust, and we've all talked about
Sure.
that in terms of leadership. When they saw that I was going to go down in a classroom and work with students, they needed a break for something when we built the first schedules. I didn't build the schedules. I said, well, y'all pick a leader from each team. It was a large school, over 800 students from each grade level and from the specials, and y'all build the schedule. They said, we don't know how to build a schedule. I said, well, I don't know how to build a schedule. So y'all build a schedule, bring it to me,
Figure
and
it
let's
out.
work it out.
Yes.
And make sure every grade level has a common planning time every week. Oh, Lord. I said, y'all have to meet every week. So, and we worked it out. And when they realized when something happened, I was like, go to your planning time. I got your class. They said,
Wow,
what do
you
you
got their
have?
back.
I said, I'm going to teach the class. I'm a teacher. I know how to teach. And so I think that helped in that shifting. And I was there 4 years, and we were one of the lowest. And when I left in the 4th year, we had the highest DLA scores in the district and the second highest math. And people were like, what? What's going over there in Westlake? They said, well, it's that Sheryl Abshire over there pushing all those teachers. And so
Sure.
I just think when you have a passion for your work and you've been compelled and called to leadership, that you have a responsibility and accountability to not only be your best, but help everyone be the best they can be. And that running with winners thing has always been a true North Star for me, to hang around with people that I felt were winners. And that's you and Diane and Frankie and, Keith Kruger and CoSN and a lot of our peers in this network we've built nationally have not only been mentors and coaches to me, but colleagues and friends that lift us up,
Yes.
that
Yes.
lift us up.
One last thing that I noticed out of your story is that when you did that scheduling, you said make sure you have a common planning time so you can all plan together. So you were even setting up the conditions for your teachers to run with winners, right? And to have that time together so they could do just like you're talking about, elevate each other, help each other out, and learn from each other. So that's pretty fantastic.
I think the key is, I think so many people have such incredible knowledge and skills, and they don't have anybody to say, yes, you can. I'm very proud of the fact that many of the teachers that were teaching in that school moved into principalships and into directorships in the district. One of the assistant superintendents looked around at one principal's meeting after I had been named CTO, and he said, how many of your girls are in this room? I went, a whole lot, Leo, and more coming. He said, what are you doing to them? I said, I'm just telling them how good they are. Go back and get your certification. Become a principal. Oh, I can't do that. Why can't you do that? This person can do it. Very proud of, with my leadership nudging, the state principal of the year for Louisiana, the state teacher of the year for Louisiana came out of my school. One of the state speech teachers came out of my school, and people that were working as paraprofessionals got certified as teachers and moved into roles because somebody told them, you can.
So
Circle the wagons, run with the winners, learn from each other, support each other, nudge each other. And so many people did that for me. I tell people, oh, Sheryl did this, Sheryl did that. I said, look, I stand on the shoulders of giants. So many people helped me from a very, very young age, a second grade teacher telling me when, we were not wealthy. Like I said, we lived with my grandparents, me telling her, I'm going to be a teacher. And she said, of course you are. She said,
Very
what do you want to be?
assuredly,
I'm going to be a
right?
second grade teacher. And she said, of course you are. And when I was so fortunate to be nominated and named as the first teacher in the National Teachers Hall of Fame, I went back to Port Arthur, Texas, to Miss James' house. And when I walked up to the thing, she said, you're a second grade teacher, aren't you? I said, I am. And I told the story during my induction about her because I think if not for her, I don't know where I would have gone, because I remember that at 7 years old, her telling me, of course you can be a teacher. And at that point, who knew what path my life would take, but she led me forward.
Yes, and I think many people have been nudged by Sheryl Abshire. And also, I feel like many people have heard, of course you can. And now we know where that came from. It came from a strong mother, a strong grandmother, and a very special teacher who saw that talent in you. Well, I appreciate you seeing the talent in others and giving them that nudge, being the role model that you are as well. What last words of advice do you have for our young leaders who want to understand more about how they can be the best they can be?
I think you have to lead with your passion. I think leadership is hard work. It's not easy. It takes sacrifices on a personal and professional level. And you have to really have a passion for what you want to do and care about it, because I think it shows in everything you do, Diane. I think we see people who their work is a job, and we see people who their work is a passion. There's a saying that every day you go to work in something you love, it's not a job.
Exactly.
You don't feel like you're doing a job. And for the 40-something years I worked in the Calcasieu Parish Public Schools, it never felt like a job to me, even though there were some tough years with some challenging bosses. It never felt like a job to me. That's why I continued to work so long, with my husband telling me, you realize you could have retired 2 or 3 years ago and you cost us money when you go to work? I said, I know, but I love my job. And I love the people. And it's so much fun to be with these people.
And you're still going. And it must not be a job for you.
It is not a job working with you and all of our colleagues, Diane. Until they tell us we can't or we can't, I think I'll keep doing it, because it is the energy that enthuses me and makes me want to wake up in the morning. I think makes me a better person by my association of running with winners.
Yes, and all that energy, from the people you nudge, you gather that up again, and it fuels you. So thank you, Sheryl Abshire, for running with the winners.
Thank you, Diane.
This has been Beneath the Water podcast, hosted by me, Diane Dersch. Deanna Dersch is executive producer, creative director, and editor. Brock Mende is our audio engineer and sound designer. Special thanks to Friends of Friends Recording in Chicago, Illinois. The link to the community can be found at the description below. Also, please subscribe and give us a 5-star review, because those reviews go a long way in helping us reach the people who will find a home here. Thanks for joining.